Today, we're going to deconstruct one of the most powerful, yet often invisible, forces in modern communication. We're talking about the architecture of semantic certainty. Just picture this for a second. Right now, at this very moment, someone out there has the exact problem you solve. They've got the budget, they even have a real desire to change their situation. And yet, their mouse is hovering right over that back button. In a split second, they're just gone. So, the big question is, why? Why are they leaving? It's almost never about your price. It's not because you're missing some feature. It's something much, much deeper. They're leaving because they are afraid, plain and simple. Afraid of making a mistake, afraid of looking stupid, afraid of buying into another promise that just turns out to be hollow. They're terrified your marketing is just a beautiful lie. And here's the paradox, right? Most of our attempts to reassure them, they actually just make that fear even worse. This is a trap so many of us fall into. We call it the Rationality Illusion. It's this old school idea that if we just pile on enough information, list out every single feature, and throw enough data at somebody, they'll logically conclude that we're the only choice. But you know what? The exact opposite is true. More information doesn't create clarity. It usually just creates more doubt, more questions, and more little cracks for fear to seep in. And this right here is the heart of the whole thing. When you sell with information, you're basically handing your prospect a box of Lego pieces and saying, "Here, you figure out how to build success." It actually signals your own doubt, and it creates a world of maybe. And let me tell you, in today's market, maybe is an absolute killer. But selling with certainty? That's totally different. It isn't about persuasion. It's about making a rock-solid promise. It signals unwavering conviction, and it's designed to get a definitive yes, because it looks fear right in the eye and outweighs it. You see, a sale is just that moment, when your conviction finally becomes stronger than their doubt. So how in the world did we get here? Well, this wasn't some slow, gradual shift. It was a full-blown revolution, and it was born from a crisis that completely rewired the relationship between brands and their customers. Let's dig into how this whole new approach became an absolute necessity. What's really wild is just how fast this all happened. You know, back in the early 2020s, people just got really good at tuning out traditional marketing speak. Then AI came along and it democratized the look of authority. All of a sudden, anyone could spit out a professional-looking brand and some confident-sounding copy. But when the appearance of authority becomes free, it also becomes worthless. This led straight to what we call the trust default crisis. Brands with these perfectly tuned, beautiful funnels started seeing their sales just decay for no apparent reason. And it's because the audience had developed this impenetrable skeptical shield. The only signal that could possibly get through that shield was quantifiable certainty, a promise so specific, so backed up, that it was impossible to fake. And this crisis forced a huge shift in thinking. The smartest people in the room realized that a brand isn't just a pretty logo or a clever tagline anymore. No, a modern, resilient brand is a contract. It's a promise. And actually, it's more than that. It's an indemnified promise, one that carries a real, painful penalty for the brand if it doesn't deliver. This quote just nails the new reality perfectly. Nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to buy a new piece of software or another online course. That's not what they want. They wake up wanting a result. They just want their problem to be gone. They are searching for a guaranteed outcome. And that guarantee is only believable when the person making the promise has some real skin in the game. The entire game shifted from mere persuasion to absolute, unwavering commitment. Okay, so if a brand is a contract, how do you actually write it? Well, this isn't about sitting around and brainstorming creative ideas. This is about engineering. Let's deconstruct the core mechanism, a 4-part structural equation for building trust right from the ground up. These are the 4 pillars of what we call the Semantic Certainty Engine. First, you've got the outcome anchor. That's the real transformation your customer is buying. Second, quantitative specificity, turning all those vague words into hard numbers. Third is the effort eater. This is where you remove their biggest perceived roadblock. And finally, the big one, the risk absorption clause. That's the ultimate proof that you mean what you say. So let's break each one down. All right, let's start with the outcome anchor. This is so crucial. You have to escape the trap of talking about your tool and instead start talking about their dream. You don't sell data organization software. You sell hitting your sales quota while you're on vacation. Why? Because that's the emotional endpoint. That's the heaven that lights up the reward centers in the brain. Your features are just the car. The transformation is the destination. Your promise has to be anchored to that destination. Next, we need to inject the language of certainty itself. And that language is numbers. Vague words like fast, more, or better. That's marketing fluff, and a skeptical brain just dismisses it instantly. But numbers are the language of contracts. They're precise. They create a clear picture. Fast is a guess your brain has to work to figure out. In 48 hours, well, that's a commitment it can actually trust. Numbers build conviction because they're measurable and unambiguous. They give the brain something solid to hold on to. Now, this component is a real game changer, and it's the one so many people miss. See, even if your prospect believes your outcome is possible, they'll still hesitate if they think it's going to be too hard for them. The effort eater confronts that fear head-on. It's that powerful without clause that proves your system isn't just effective, it's efficient, without learning to code, without spending a dime on ads. What you're doing here is you're finding their biggest perceived point of friction, the time, the cost, the expertise they think they don't have, and you're explicitly vaporizing it. This makes the path to their heaven seem not just possible, but actually frictionless. And that brings us to the fourth and honestly the most powerful part of this whole engine, the risk absorption clause. This is the moment you truly put your money where your mouth is. You state clearly and without any wiggle room the penalty you will pay if you fail. Or you don't pay. Or we'll work for free until you get the result. Or we'll give you double your money back. This is the ultimate proof of your conviction. It says to your prospect's fearful brain, we are so certain of this outcome that we are willing to bear 100% of the risk. It's the final piece of the puzzle that makes the entire promise completely unshakable.
So, we've seen the mechanism. It's a powerful piece of engineering, for sure. But why does it work so darn well on a deep neurological level? Let's dive into the psychology that makes this engine fire on all cylinders.
At the core of all this is a really well-documented cognitive bias called the certainty effect. To put it simply, our brains are not rational calculators, not even close. We have this powerful, non-negotiable preference for a sure thing. We dramatically overvalue outcomes that are 100% certain compared to outcomes that are even 99% probable. That tiny 1% of doubt carries a massive psychological weight. It transforms a near certainty into just another gamble. This slide just makes it all so clear. Think about it. Which would you choose? A 90% chance to win $100 or a 100% chance to win 80? Almost everyone takes the $80. The first option, the brain sees that 10% risk and it hesitates. It starts calculating the odds of failure. But the second option, the brain sees zero risk. It sees safety, and when it sees safety, it chooses action. We are biologically programmed to take the certain path, even if a riskier one might offer a slightly better reward. And this all comes back to a fundamental truth about us as humans: loss aversion. Neurologically speaking, the pain of a loss is about twice as powerful as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Think about that. This isn't just a preference, it's a survival instinct that's been hardwired into us over thousands of years. For our ancestors, losing a food source could be a death sentence, while finding an extra one was just a nice bonus. So our brains are designed, first and foremost, to avoid risk. This is the biological engine that drives the certainty effect. So what the certainty engine is really doing is pretty amazing. It's performing what you could call a neural bypass, a promise that has a clear outcome, a specific number, an effort eater, and a risk absorption clause. It doesn't even get processed by the slow, skeptical part of our brain. It bypasses the fear center, the amygdala, and it speaks directly to our fast, intuitive System 1 thinking. It makes the decision to say yes feel neurologically safe. And maybe most importantly, it completely removes the stupidity tax, that deep social fear of being the one who got tricked, who made the wrong call and now has to live with it. Okay, so we've covered the theory, the history, the psychology. Now let's make this really practical. How do you go from just understanding this stuff to actually putting it to work? Let's walk through a clear, actionable framework for architecting your very own high-conviction promise. The whole process really has 3 core steps. First, you have to map the emotional landscape. Stop asking what your product is and start asking what nightmare it ends and what dream it delivers. That's your heaven and your hell. Second, you engineer the numerical anchor. You have to pick a concrete, non-negotiable number, a dollar amount, a time frame, a percentage. And third, you audit for friction. What is the single hardest part of the process for your customer? Find it and then build your promise around explicitly removing it. And this just perfectly illustrates the transformation. Look at the before. Unlock your potential. It's vague, it's cloudy, it's just poetry. It's completely ignorable. Now look at the after. It's a lockdown signed contract. It's solid, secure, and incredibly specific.
It spells out the outcome, the timeline, and the stakes. The first one is a wish. The second one is a guarantee. One is basically begging for attention. The other makes yes feel inevitable.
I want you to let this one sink in, because it's a simple rule, but it will change how you write and communicate forever. If your core promise doesn't have a specific quantifiable number in it, it's not actually a promise. It's just poetry. And in a world that is drowning in noise, poetry doesn't sell. Contracts do. And this brings us to our final lesson, the core insight of this entire system. This is where the cold logic of business meets the warm reality of human hope. It's about pulling, not pushing. When you boil it all down, the power of this entire architecture really rests on two fundamental truths. One is the cold, hard math of business. The other is a much simpler and much more profound human truth. The math is just undeniable. Brands that use this model see higher customer lifetime value and dramatically lower customer acquisition costs. It just works. But the human truth is simpler, and maybe even more important. Deep down, all of us, we want to believe. We are desperately swimming in a sea of noise, just looking for a signal of truth, for proof that our problems can actually be solved. A strong, certain promise gives people permission to hope again. When you build that bridge of certainty over their canyon of doubt, you're not just making a sale. You're proving that you're not just another vendor, you're a leader. You're someone willing to stand up and take responsibility for a specific, guaranteed result. And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. True growth isn't about shoving people through a series of steps. It's the natural result of building a promise so strong, so certain, and so valuable that it doesn't need to push. It just pulls people toward a better future.